Okay, so welcome to today's Wednesday webinar when we are looking at exploring the draft ratings characteristics. This was a bit of a surprise because CQC had been saying, oh, we're going to put out some more information. We'll talk a little bit more about, different characteristics. It was kind of whispered about, but there wasn't really much clear defined stuff. There was a discussion about it being released around August time. Then obviously the Dash review and the other reviews came out and they had bigger fish to fry. And then and I thought this was perfect timing, really. It was literally, I received the email at 20 to 5 on Halloween. So imagine just as it gets dark and all the ghosts start to come out to haunt everyone, at that very moment, we get an email from CQC saying, hi, everyone, here's a bunch of stuff. And I would argue slightly buried in that email was this information around ratings characteristics. And this is a screenshot of the email. You can see it's literally just that blue text there, draft set of ratings characteristics. So if you go back to your emails, look at an email that you received Halloween evening, 31st of October, around about 4:30, 5 p.m. from James Bullion. And within it, we have this here, this little link, and I'm going to send it out to people probably tomorrow, just in case people haven't been able to find it, and I'll be sharing it today so you can see it. Fundamentally, this is, to quote one of my esteemed clients, this is the most useful thing CQC have sent out in some time. I'm not saying that to diss CQC. I think they've sent out lots of very useful stuff, but I know for clients, for many care services, they feel that these ratings characteristics are actually quite a useful resource for them. So what is it? Well, we're going to look at it in a moment, but in short, it's 67 pages long. It's actually longer than the Chloe Prompts document because it has 21,671 words, which is 826 words more than the Chloe Prompts document. So it's actually smaller. It's actually bigger than the Chloe Prompts. Remember, it has S1.2, S1.3, S1.4. Now, that said, there is a big difference between this and the Chloe Prompts document. The Chloe Prompts document was a framework breakdown and it was used, it was adhered to. Show me your evidence for S1.2, show me your evidence to S2.4. This is not like that. This is not Chloe Prompts, this is not legislation, this is not framework, this is not regulation, this is suggestions, guidance, recommendation. So this is not about what must be done, it's about what could be done. It's about what CQC perceive as outstanding, good, RI, inadequate. It is not a menu of what you must now do. Just to give you a little overview, 6-7 pages long. It's organised by key question and quality statements. There's a safe section, effective, responsive, caring, well led, and there's sections for each quality statement within that. And then within each of those quality statements and key questions, there is a generalised description of outstanding, good, requires improvement, and inadequate, both for the key question and then again also for the individual quality statement. So this is kind of the how-to guidance. One of the things that we talked about, if you've been on any of our training days, one of the things we said that was quite interesting is that if you take the SAFE quality statements, you can get all of SAFE on one PowerPoint slide. In the old Chloe Prompts document, it was 20 pages, and now you've got the whole thing in one PowerPoint slide. And some people raised the concern of, is this detailed enough? Do I know what to do? And CQC were always quite honest and said, well, the idea is that you make it work for you because you were worried that we were being too prescriptive. So we got rid of the Chloe prompts and we've given you this kind of overall description of where you need to be for each of the quality statements. And it's up to you to show that you've done that. A year in, can you believe we're almost a year in now? A year into the framework, and a lot of people in the sector have said, we need more detail. And that's where this has come from. It is guidance on what outstanding, good, RI and inadequate look like for each of the quality statements. Couple of things we have to bear in mind. This is a draft. It is listed in the email as a draft. The document has draft in big letters. That doesn't mean it's not useful, doesn't mean it's not important, but it also means it's not a final version. So be aware that this is a draft guidance on the ratings characteristics. Why have CQC created this? We'll show you in a moment, don't worry. Why have they created it? Well, as I said earlier, a lot of us within the sector really like the quality statements, but there are also many that felt that there wasn't enough detail. So take something like kindness, compassion, dignity. It's like a sentence, two sentences. Is that enough for me as a care provider to go on, or would a bit more flesh on the bones, would a bit more detail be of use? So CQC have responded to this request for more detail through this ratings characteristics document. There was also more concern around, to what extent does the quality statements apply to my sector? If you look at the quality statement set up of the single assessment framework, it's universal. Whether you work in a hospital, learning disability service, dentist, if you are regulated by CQC, you have the same 34 quality statements. And again, there was kind of voices from the sector saying, I feel like we need something that's more specific for us, more specific for the care sector. So again, what we see in this document is a description of those rating characteristics that more specifically fit adult social care. Finally, what do CQC actually observe? What do they actually assess for each quality statement? We've got the description of the quality statement and what good care looks like. We've got that sentence or two, but what does it involve? Talk about something like safeguarding, a couple of sentences about safeguarding, protecting people, but what are they actually going to look like? What do they actually want to see? What does good, outstanding practice look like? What do we have to put in front of those inspectors' eyes? This is why CQC have, I wouldn't say capitulated, but they have listened, they have responded and decided to publish these draft, emphasis on the word draft, characteristics of what good, what outstanding, good, requires improvement, and inadequate look like. Key points to remember, this comes directly from the document. How to use these characteristics. I want this to be burned into your mind because we can go off onto a lot of tangents if we don't use this well. Number one, the characteristics are a guide rather than an exhaustive description for the key questions and quality statements. This is not a tick list. This is not a checklist. This is not, you need to do all these things to be good. You need to do all these things for outstanding. This is a guide. I cannot emphasize that enough. The word draft is written all over it, and there's this clear outline that these characteristics are a guide. Number two, they should be used alongside external best practice standards and guidance. They don't trump the regulations. Trumps may be a bad term to use in view of him now becoming the president. They don't trump the regulations. They don't trump the guidance that you might have from other respected bodies that support you. They don't trump, any of the legal frameworks. These are additional guidance alongside all of that stuff. Not all content will be relevant for all services. Adult social care is a wonderful, wild, complicated beast. And so what might apply for some services, e.g. resi and residential and supported living, for example, may not apply for home care or may not apply for learning disability or may not apply for other forms of adult social care service. So it's not a list that applies universally. Not all characteristics need to be demonstrated to meet each score. So it's not a case of you look at the good descriptives for a particular quality statement and we need to do all of those to get a good. It is not a tick list. It's not like the Chloe prompts where you had all those specific areas you had to meet. It doesn't work like that. It is a guide. Bear in mind the way that you get your final score for each of those key questions, safe, effective, care and responsive and well led, is via the scores that you get for the quality statement. So that final key question rating is the culmination of those quality statement ratings. So just bear in mind, what you've got here is information on what to do for each quality statement and the score for each quality statement. That then leads into the final score for each key question. And then finally, a really important one, the key question characteristics are intended to describe a spectrum where services can incrementally move depending on changes to the different areas of quality within the key question. So this is about moving through, hopefully from RI to good, from good to outstanding. It's about progression and development, not a list of things to do. A little interesting thing about some of the terminology that they have used. Obviously, we know we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4, which typically stand for outstanding, good, required improvement, inadequate. A few useful things here. They've defined 4, outstanding, as exceptional standards of care. So they've used the word exceptional instead of outstanding. Not sure why, but that's fine. For 3, good standard of care. For 2, which will be an RI, some shortfalls in the standard of care. And then 1, inadequate, significant shortfalls in the standard of care. And I'm thinking of my good friend Julie Garrity here. They've also pinned it to kind of what that means from a regulatory perspective. So 4 exceptional standards of care, regulations are fully met. Yes, those that have asked, yes, the video will be shared. I'll be sharing this recording on YouTube tomorrow and I'll send the link out so that people can see that. Good standard of care, regulations are usually met. Some shortfalls, so the RI, regulations may or may not be met. And significant shortfalls, normally some regulations are not met. Again, quite open with their terminology. So they've said regulations are usually met, not regulations are met. There seems to be a bit of a flexibility there. Again, two, some shortfalls. Regulations may or may not be met. So it's kind of hedging its bets a little bit. Even one, inadequate. It's not saying regulations are not met. It's saying normally some regulations are not met. So they're kind of being a bit flexible here, but fundamentally, the extent to which you are complying with regulations will have a direct impact, obviously, on where you sit with that care. So here's a little look at the front page. We're going to jump into it in a moment. It is a Word document. It's a very big Word document. It's 6-7 pages long. I will be sharing it via email, and I posted it on LinkedIn on Friday or whenever Halloween was. I posted it up, so do feel free to go on my LinkedIn and go and look at my posts, and you'll find it there. Again, check your email and you will see it. What I'm going to do now, which I desperately hope will work, if it doesn't work, it's going to be very awkward. I'm going to share my screen and then I can show you the document itself. Here we go. Share my screen. Let's see all of that, do we? Here we go. So here we have it. We have here the document. If someone could put a thumbs up, just so I know that people are able to see that, that'd be really helpful. Here we have the document. What we can see is it's organized into the key questions and it's organized into quality statements underneath. Let me just quickly check. Can people see that when I was sharing my screen there? Could people see the document?
Yes.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. So I didn't want to be talking to myself for 5 minutes. So here we go. We have safe, effective, care, and responsible, well-led. We have the quality statements. I'm going to click, just for fun, I'm going to click on safe and effective staffing, something that I'm sure we're all pulling our hair out after the NI increase and all that's going on there. So it's a relevant one. If we click on that, you will see that what we have here, safe and effective staffing, it starts with 4, the exceptional standards with care. And again, I won't read it all out, but give you an idea. Continued development of the staff skills, competence and knowledge are recognised as being integral to ensuring high quality care. Staff are proactively supported and encouraged to acquire new skills, use their transferable skills and share best practice. Innovative, advanced and appropriate techniques to develop capability and competence are embedded and supported, such as simulation-based learning. Agency staff and volunteers are proactively supporting their role. Leaders develop coordinated and adaptive anticipatory strategies to manage demand and capacity issues relating to staffing and have systems and processes that support this. Then we go into good. I'm not going to read it all out, but you get the idea. There is a description of what they are looking for. If we go to the next page, we can see what RI is, the shortfalls. So things like recruitment practice are not always robust or safe, periods of understaffing or inappropriate skill mix, gaps in management. And then if we go to 1, significant shortfalls, recruitment practices are poor, they are not safe. People receive care from staff and volunteers who do not have the skills or experience that's needed. Substantial or frequent staff shortages, poor management of agency and locum staff. Staff are not supervised or managed effectively. Poor performance is not dealt with in a timely or effective way. Now, what do we have and what don't we have here? We have guidance. If you look at the safe and effective staffing description, it's kind of a sentence or two, and that's really it. What we have here is some of the delineation of the things that differentiate exceptional, outstanding, and good. Now, of course, what is robust? Is robust, can you be so robust that it becomes into the exceptional? There are some interpretations. That's the nature of language. But we can see already some key topics that come up here. We've got things around skill sets. We've got the level of support. We've got the way in which they are trained. We've got support for agency staff. And we've got the way in which leaders anticipate things around managing staff demand and capacity. They haven't turned that into a checklist. They've turned it into sentences. But when you look through these, you can start to pick out what are the things that I need to think through. Let's have a look at another one. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Medicines optimization. So 4, comprehensive system to proactively promote a strong safety culture for medicines. People are enabled and proactively involved in decisions. Staff not only meet good practice standards in relation to legislation, they also embrace and contribute to innovation. Compliance with medicines policy and procedure is routinely monitored. So if I was to break that down into a few areas, what do you have here? We have involvement in decisions, so decision making for people receiving medicines. We have here the idea that there is innovation and research in terms of good practices for distributing medicines. We have compliance, routine compliance, and open culture and learning from incidents. Can you see how there, in a broad sense, there are themes, there are things that you can pick out and show and demonstrate. They're not doing it as a checklist, they're not doing it as a tick list, but as you look through these kind of little mini sentence paragraphs, you start to see the sorts of things that we need to show we are doing. Now, I'm not saying that this is perfect or that this is it's exactly where it needs to be. It is a draft. They are actively asking for feedback on this. So if you do go into your CQC email, look at this and do fill out their little feedback survey to give your views on this document. What I would say is it does give a lot more information than the quality statements alone. Again, they also have an overview for each key question. So as well as the details of the quality statements, you also have an overview for each key question of outstanding, good, RI, and inadequate. Obviously, we won't be going through all of it now, A, because this is only a half-hour webinar, and B, because there's 67 pages of it. Have a look at it, download it, and I think one of the really important things is to digest, okay, what sort of areas are coming up here? What we're going to do now, the last little part of this webinar, I'm just going to talk about some ways that you can use this document to enhance your practices. So let's share the PowerPoint again. Give me one moment. I do hope you'll find this useful. I think it's an interesting document, just simply from the fact that really what we're looking at here is a document that has been developed because of the sector. We all felt that there needed to be more guidance. And actually, credit where credit is due, CQC gave us that document. So how do we use this? I'm going to make 5 suggestions on how you can use this document, how it could be of value, because as a manager, sitting there and memorizing it is not an option. Number 1, if you have recently been assessed, so I'm talking in the last month or so, if it was done like 6 months ago, they're probably not going to take much notice. But if you've been recently assessed, or you're in the midst of an assessment, or in the midst of the report writing, factual accuracy whole process, use this document. Go back to this document, cross-reference it with either a recently published report if you've just had your report published, or what has been looked at and assessed if you're in the midst of them writing. Does this document reflect in a broad sense what CQC have assessed when they've done your assessment? Does it reflect what's in your report? Does the language match? I'm not saying that it's going to be a slam dunk argument, but if you can show that your report doesn't really include any of the characteristics and areas CQC say they are looking for each of these quality statements, or perhaps even more so, that there are key characteristics listed here that weren't even considered, that is a relevant point to make. Doesn't mean they're going to chuck the whole thing out and start again. Doesn't mean they're going to roll over and go, yes, you're right, we'll upgrade your rating. But it's a fair criticism. You have these characteristics. If you are in the midst of being assessed or you have been recently assessed, go back to your report, go back to the evidence they looked at, go back to this document, cross-reference. Have I been assessed in line with the ratings characteristics CQC have now published? Number 2, focus on your current service rating aim. So some services are hungry for good, some services are hungry for outstanding, and there's lots of reasons why people might do that sequentially. Have a look at the quality statements that you know you're likely to be reviewed under. Bear in mind, if you've got any key questions that are RI or inadequate, all of those quality statements are going to be looked at as a bare minimum. So if you've got 3 key questions are good, 2 of them are inadequate, you know for a fact that those, or RI, sorry, you know for a fact those 2 RIs or 2 inadequates are going to be assessed in their fullness. So go first of all to the quality statements and ratings characteristics for those key questions, for those areas that you know are definitely going to come up. And if you're already at good and you want to keep good, or if you're already at good, you want to go up to outstanding, have a look at the quality statements that you know you need to do some work on. We all know in the back of our minds the bits that we're strong at, the bits that we're not so hot at. Instead of kind of having a bit of a stab at the dark and a guess, use those rating characteristics to kind of shape, right, what do we need to get on top of in these key questions or in these quality statements so that we can reach that next level, we can reach that good, or we can reach that outstanding. Number 3, this is an interesting one. Look at your current quality focuses and expenditure. Have a look at the things that you are doing a lot of work on now. It's kind of similar to number two. Number two is about you focusing on areas that you know you need to do work on. Number three is about focusing on the areas you are currently doing work on. If you know you're doing a big piece around a particular area, around training or around safeguarding or around staff management, or around, person-centered care, if you've got a particular focus at the moment, you're putting a lot of time, a lot of quality focus, a lot of expenditure, a lot of resource into, go back to this document, go back to that ratings characteristics and just check. We're doing all this work on this stuff. Are we moving in the same direction as the quality statement indicators, these ratings characteristics are suggesting? It's not about chucking things out or changing things. It's just about sense checking. Okay, we're doing all this quality stuff over here. How does that link with the ratings characteristics, the draft ratings characteristics? Are we moving in line? If we're spending all this time and money, are we moving in line with where they are asking us to go? Number 4. Now, I actually had to tell myself off for this. Avoid the temptation to turn this into a list. I nearly did this, but then I realized it would defeat the whole point. It is possible for you to go through each of these descriptors and sum it up in a word or two and basically create an absolute mega list of outstanding, good, RI, inadequate for every quality statement with a list of things that need to be done. Please don't do that. A couple of reasons. We don't need key line of inquiry 2.0. That is something that I think we need to move away from. The reason as well is because actually as a list, it's probably not going to be that useful. It's probably not going to be that helpful, because actually, whilst it's giving you the areas, the detail is up to your service. If you must do some kind of organization, pick out the key ideas, but don't turn them into things that must be done. Bear in mind, this is guidance, not legislation, not Chloe prompts, not the assessment framework itself. It is guidance to support you. Don't turn it into a list to batter yourself or your colleagues with. That is not what it's intended for, and it's not actually a useful way to do it. That said, what I do think is useful is looking through some of those sentences, looking through some of those paragraphs and going, okay, what are the core areas here that we can be aware of? And that's the key thing here. You're not going to memorize these 6-7 pages, but if you can start to identify what the core areas are under each of those quality statements, what are the things I need to put in front of the eyes of my inspector? What are the processes they're going to be checking out as part of this quality statement? That is perhaps a list with a small L that might be of value to you. I was speaking to a service today, and they were talking about audits. And I said, well, look, use this to shape your audits, just to make sure that what's in your audits kind of broadly match what these ratings characteristics suggest, because that's going to help you ensure your audits are moving in the right direction. That is very different from printing out this 67-page document, putting a tick box next to each pair of sentences and trying to do it like that. We need to make sure that we make this a useful guide for our practice, not the centerpiece of how we assess our work. And number 5, don't forget the evidence categories. The evidence categories still exist. People's experiences, feedback from staff and leaders, feedback from partners, observations, processes. Those are the evidence types CQC will be collecting. What the guidance does is gives a bit more meat on the bones on what may come up and what may be looked at, and helps you get an idea of how do I need to position this. Again, we've talked about how we support and train staff. You may want to help staff understand some of these good and outstanding terminologies, and some of these areas so that they can talk about them with confidence. But fundamentally, you've still got those 5 evidence categories: people's experiences, feedback from staff and leaders, feedback from partners, observations and processes. That is the stuff that you show. What we have here in this ratings characteristics document is some information around what specific CQC might be looking at and what the difference between outstanding in that area and good in that area is, which can help you in terms of your audits and in terms of the way that you kind of assess the evidence that is coming in. We're a few minutes early, which is a good thing because you all have busy lives to lead. If you want to get in contact, ping me an email, research@careresearch.co.uk. You also go to our website, careresearch.co.uk. Most of you will probably have found me via LinkedIn, and that's why you're here, but the information is there. I have a quick read through some of these comments. I think there's some important stuff here. One person has raised the possibility that, does it still feel a bit woolly, open to differences of opinion? I think that is definitely the case. I think it's more defined than the quality statements alone. Without this information, the quality statements are much more open to interpretation. There is a bit more detail, a bit more meat on the bone. Fundamentally, my personal view is, unless we have AI and robots and numbers and maths, there's always going to be an element of interpretation. That's the nature of human beings. Even AI, we've discovered, is, awful in the way that it makes assumptions and has bias. I think what we are seeing is greater levels of detail that can hopefully help you direct that process. Another comment, considering this process was to reduce the level of subjectivity, this guidance still gives inspectors too much scope, remains open to interpretation, so not sure how this guidance supports the initial aims and objectives. I think that's a really fine point. I mean, I think we've got this really interesting dichotomy where we want CQC to be completely or as unobjective as possible. And I don't know how we do that, because we either do it with large amounts of guidance and detail and instructional, and then people feel, oh, well, they're just kind of put in a box, or we have it more open, but services can kind of show the things that work for them, but they're naturally interpretive element to that. I think the interpretive aspect is always going to be there to some degree. I think the intention of this draft characteristics document is to give a bit more definition, a bit more meat on the bones on what exactly good versus outstanding looks like and what sorts of areas might crop up. But I fully see your point, and I do in part agree. Another person mentioned it'd be interesting to see whether the finalised wording used in this document will be used by inspectors as general templates for report writing. Yes, I think that's a really interesting point. Will CQC be doing drop-down sentences and selecting them? I've said before that could be how CQC write reports. We looked at the last webinar a couple of weeks ago at the new pilots that are going on, and we looked at what the new reports might look like, and it's possible that some of these ratings characteristics could dovetail into that, and that could form the basis of what those kind of short summary statements after each quality statement, instead of there being a big paragraphs after each quality statement, they're looking at having a few short sentences. Perhaps that will dovetail with some of the information that is stored in this ratings characteristics. We will have to see. So I think this issue of supporting people with this additional information is really valuable. I think there's lots going on. I think what we're seeing is CQC are listening. They're trying to respond to the fact that people felt that there wasn't enough detail, and they wanted some sector specifics, and they wanted some differentiation between outstanding and good, which has been delivered by this document. I think there's still some challenges around, what does the final version of this look like? Is it too much? Is it too little? Does it need to be more defined? How do we help with things like, the ambiguity of interpretation? But I think it is a step in the right direction. I'm going to stop the recording. If anyone